To Make a Difference with Gail is a very special guest today, and that guest is Katie Beers. Katie, welcome.
Thank you.
Katie, I just heard you speaking, and we're at Hofstra University. Perhaps you'd like to share a little bit as to why you were the guest speaker today.
I was speaking for the Long Island Youth and Safety Coalition, and the topic was called The Talk, and it's about sexuality, sex abuse, and things you could do to prevent it and help and just different things like that. It's a wonderful topic, something that I'm saddened that we have to talk about, but in this day and age, I think that it's very important.
And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on my show. I had spoken to you as we walked over here on this very cold day, but it's very important that people know that if they have been abused, how they can get help, to know that it's not their fault, to know that somebody like Katie Beers is there for them. You have endured such tragedy, but out of that tragedy, the phoenix rising. Look who you are today, how much you have accomplished, and I also want people to know that there are ways that they can help. I think, Katie, many people are afraid to get involved, and I think that we have to discuss that and some of the ways that we can help them. I loved your book, Buried Memories. It's Katie Beers, Carolyn Gussoff. Phenomenal book, powerful. Read it a few times, couldn't put it down the first time, and just felt like I knew you so well after that. And I want to thank you so much for sharing that story. That's very difficult to do.
It actually, writing Buried Memories was kind of cathartic. It gave me a further sense of closure. It gave me an opportunity to be able to help people and to be able to get out there and share my story. And that has been very important to me for the past 22 years.
In order to understand why you wrote the book and what happened to you, we also have to go back into your past as well. But let's start with this little 9-year-old girl, 2 days shy of her 10th birthday, 1992. You were invited to go to a Spaceplex, which was a children's arcade. And the person who invited you was a family friend, John Esposito.
Yes.
You had been told to stay away from him, but your godmother, Linda Ingalari, had convinced you that it would be okay to go. And everything changed after that. Yes. And yet, Katie, you do say that the abduction and the rescue are probably the best thing that ever happened to you.
Yes.
So let's start with that quote, and then let's go back to that time, if we may, please.
All right. The abduction, yes. Horrific as it is, it was one of the best things that had happened to me. My childhood, the first 9 years of my life, I was physically abused, mentally abused, emotionally abused, sexually abused, and raped by my godmother's husband. I was emotionally abused, mentally abused, and physically abused by my godmother herself. These two people that my care was entrusted to. These two people that took severe advantage of me as a child. And I, sorry. Growing up, I didn't know what normal was. I didn't know that what was happening to me was not normal. It was my normal. It's what I dealt with every day from as early as I could remember. I would have child services come into my house 2 or 3 times to interview me and see if everything was okay. And the proper questions were not getting asked. They would ask, do you feel safe? Is anybody hurting you? Well, no, I'm not going to say yes to these questions because I was being interviewed in the bedroom where the sexual abuse and the rapes were happening. So, no, I'm not going to be honest with
And
it.
Katie, the other aspect of that, too, is that there were repercussions if you did say something. Sal Ingalari was brutal.
Yes.
I think that from reading your book, I understand that many people were frightened of him, including his wife, including your biological mother. And I know John, your brother, is 6.5 years older than you, did try to protect you.
Yes.
And what he received from him was a beating for it.
That is correct.
This is a man that took a cat of yours and threw it against the wall. What 9-year-old, 10-year-old, or any adult would have difficulty standing up to this man?
Exactly.
So I think that has to be definitely a part of it. His wife, I know she lost a leg to diabetes. She was confined to her bedroom. She took baths, and that was about it. She also abused you.
Yes.
You know what I find terrific is that there were so many adults you're supposed to trust. People, neighbors, family, educators in school. And somehow it just didn't happen that way. I heard you speak today, so excited that you have that trust, you have forgiveness, and you are able to help others. But we have to go back to that because I think that's so important. And I know later on we're going to be speaking with experts about how people can get involved and need to get involved. But again, there's that fear element. What about when you used to do laundry? At what age were you?
My earliest memories of doing laundry at a laundromat was 4 years old. I would walk down the street, probably barefoot if I had to guess, and I would walk to the laundromat carrying Sal and Linda's laundry, and I wasn't tall enough to reach the coin slot or the detergent dispenser, so the attendant there had to assist me with changing the clothes over because they were too heavy. And this wasn't a red flag for people that something is wrong. This 4-year-old is doing laundry. Granted, the strip mall that I was in was right around the corner from my house. Back in the 80s, we weren't concerned about stranger danger. We weren't concerned about abductions. We weren't concerned about any of these things because we weren't told about them. They were still there, but we weren't told about them.
That is so true. But what about in school? Now you're of school age. You're in between two houses, biological mom, Marilyn. And I heard you just say briefly that she wasn't prepared to be a mother. She didn't know how to be a mother. She also had quite a few jobs, and she allowed Sal and Linda to take over the house.
Yes.
You lived with your grandmother, a kind woman, but nobody stepped up to the plate. Let me ask you about school. I know in the book you said one of the most painful areas was that you were bullied by the other children.
Yes.
When you were able to go to school and you wanted to go to school.
Yes, not only did I want to go to school for the education aspect, I loved learning, but I also wanted to go because when I was in school for those 7 or 8 hours of the day, I wasn't doing errands for Sal or Linda. I wasn't being their whipping girl. I wasn't being their servant for them. I wasn't being Sal's sex toy, basically.
From the age of 2
From the age of
on.
2, yeah. So school for me was a place that I wanted to go, and there were so many days that Sal or Linda would not allow me to go, and the days that I would go, I was made fun of by the other kids. I had very many nicknames, and it was just, being at school was a horrible experience with the bullying, but it also, I would have rather have been bullied by my peers than to go through what I was going through at home.
Did teachers hear this at all? Was there any involvement, or are you not able to remember all of it? It's difficult to remember. And I think, too, in the 80s, unlike today, I think people looked the other way and figured kids could just handle it.
Sticks and stones.
Exactly, which we found later on. All right, let's get back to that quote, though, because in that quote you said it was probably the best thing that ever happened because
it brought being abducted and spending 17 days in an underground dungeon against my will, being sexually abused and raped by a different man, got me out of the abusive, horrendous, neglectful childhood that I had known for the past 9 years, almost 10 years. So for me, the being abducted and basically the recovery, being recovered, it brought me out of my childhood. It gave me a home. It sent me to foster care where I had a family. I had a mom. I had a dad. I had 4 siblings. It was amazing. It was just an amazing experience at 10 years old, being given another shot at childhood.
Got to go back to that. I call it a bunker. I think we refer to it as that in the book. It was 6 by 6 by 7. And I don't like to go into all the details, but I still think that sometimes people have to hear it, not because of the sensationalism of it all, but because I think people out there can't even understand that these things can take place. John Esposito was a trusted family friend. Yes, it was discovered that he had sexually abused your brother, and that's why your biological mom wanted to keep you away from him. However, you know, the police were in there. They would never have found this place without your help. So let's very quickly, and then I'll jump back to this. How did you help to to find you?
For 17, I manipulated John Esposito as best as a 10-year-old could. I would ask him questions about what my life was going to be like. I would ask him, well, I want to go to school. I like school. And his response would be, well, I'll teach you what you need to know. Well, I want to work when I'm old enough to work. And he would tell me he had enough money for the both of us. Okay, well, I want to get married and have kids. And his response to that was, well, I'll do that with you when it's time. And I was, again, 10 years old, and he was in his early 40s. And this was the response that I was getting from this man.
And what was uncanny is that for about a year, he had planned all of this kidnapping as a pedophile. There were different types of pedophiles, and we'll get into that later. But in his case, this arrested childhood, I think in his head, he thought he really loved you.
I think so.
I from what I'm reading from the book and the thoughts that you expressed, and yet he actually had your neck chained to a wall. He sexually abused you, which he denied until much later, right before he died.
The day he died.
Never came out in court, and again, question wasn't asked. But in this case, the only light that you had was from a little TV. He made up a makeshift toilet, and you were able to hear the police coming into the house. The question I have is that there was a device that you could hear babies with in the house. Did the police not see that device, the monitor, a baby monitor?
I have no clue.
Question? Good question, right?
Yeah, it's the one part of the monitor was down in the bunker with me. I don't know in what part of the house the other part of the baby monitor was, but Esposito didn't have any kids. Like, he had no reason to have this baby monitor.
Yes.
But he had it. But again, did he have it hidden except for when he was at home?
At one point he thought that you could actually be heard.
Yeah, and these are things that I don't really, I don't know. But yeah, and there was one point that I heard the police up above me, or I thought that I did, and I banged on the wall and the ceiling of this underground dungeon, and Esposito, I guess, had heard me. I was making enough noise, so he made more noise, so that I wasn't heard. And that was a devastating blow to me, that, oh my gosh, they could have heard me, but they didn't. But I don't dwell on those things.
No, and I know that you said that you had told him that you were fearful that you might die. And that may be one of the reasons. I think the background probably helped you to survive. Is that possible?
Yes. My severe neglect and abuse from my childhood definitely was helpful with my survival.
All right, so now you are found, and instead of going back to the only home you knew, which you thought was normal, you're brought out east to a wonderful foster family who have become your family. Still, the transition had to be difficult, wasn't it, Katie?
It was definitely difficult. I was not an easy child to deal with, 10 years old.
And understand why.
Yeah, I had just gone through more than what any adult should go through. And my foster parents were amazing. They never doubted me. They always supported me, gave me the encouragement that I needed. They're just phenomenal.
What are some of the signs that one should look for in thinking that perhaps a child is being abused either sexually, emotionally, or physically?
For me, the neglect aspect of it would be parents that aren't around, a mom or a dad that's not around, which mine never was. I was never dressed appropriately for the weather. I was doing family chores that were completely inappropriate for a child of my age. I definitely believe there are appropriate chores. My 5.5-year-old, I try to get him to clean up his toys. It doesn't work. But that's an appropriate chore. Clean up your toys when you're done playing.
Typical.
And just other things like that. For me, I didn't have friends my own age because I didn't know how to relate to kids my own age. I would talk to the people in the workers in the deli or the stationery store or the pizza parlor or the laundromat.
Adults.
I had more of a repertoire with the adults, and I was 5, 6, 7 years old. So yeah.
Yeah. Now, as far as getting the help that you needed, so many people were involved. And I would like to talk a little bit about some of them, but one name brought a smile to you before we went on camera, and that was Harvey Weinstein.
Oh, Harvey.
Can you share a little bit as to what this wonderful man did for you? I know he's no longer alive, but let's talk a little bit about him.
I was in therapy, and my therapist, Mary, had heard of this other gentleman. He was in his 70s. He had been abducted by ex-employees, and they dug a hole in the ground and put Harvey down there. I forget for how long. I think maybe about 10 days, if I remember correctly. And he was this big burly man and had this very deep voice. And Mary had called him because she found out that he had a house out in the Hamptons.
Now, Mary was your psychotherapist.
Mary was my therapist.
She worked on art therapy with you, etc.
Yes. She had called Harvey when she found out that he had a house close to where I was located, and explained who she was and explained my situation and asked if he would be interested in coming for a therapy session. And he said, sure, if I could help somebody, I'll come.
I love it.
So I'm this little, I was maybe 11 or 12 when I met Harvey, so I was this little pipsqueak of a thing, and Harvey was just this big, tall man, this deep, deep voice. And we had a couple therapy sessions, and in one of them, Harvey actually helped me remember something. I remembered that my biological brother and either his friend or my cousin were actually playing in the bunker when it was being built. I don't know what spurred that memory, but that's something that I definitely attribute to Harvey and the therapy sessions that I have. And then I remember that I asked Harvey if he had forgiven the people that had kidnapped him. And he had said, no, absolutely not. Why would I do that? And so I had a conversation with him about how I had forgiven John Esposito. And we just built this amazing relationship with each other. It was phenomenal.
Tremendous. So, and that's the whole point of you being on here today, is that we can help one another. I understand buried memories, much of which happens, which is traumatic, many of us tend to block. We want more control in our lives. And because of that, it's easier to block it. I think this gentleman helped to bring out the more emotion in you,
Yes.
and give you a chance to reconnect with who you really are as a person. And that's what you're doing today. You're helping so many people out there. If there's anybody out there who is being abused and you're afraid, just look at this person right here who's coming on the air to share her story to help you. And we're going to go in a few minutes to speak with experts to see how they can indeed help others, because it's so important. If you think that somebody is being abused, please get involved. It's better to err on that and say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, than to let something like this happen.
Exactly.
You talked about forgiveness, you talked about trust, but we also need to be quite aware of our surroundings and whom we can trust. I'll bet you have incredible sense of intuition as far as with people now.
I try to, especially when it comes to my children. I have a 5.5-year-old son and a 3.5-year-old daughter. So for me to trust anybody with their care is, I'm surprised I didn't do background checks of everybody that's in their life. But I have a family friend that watches them, and in school, I'm nervous about Logan being in school, but I don't let my childhood dictate my adulthood, and I don't look at the negative of everything. I try to look at the positive.
I think that is just amazing. And I'd like to say thank you so much for everything that you are doing for others. There's no way we have of knowing what person out there will be helped, but if it's just one, it's worth it, isn't it, Katie?
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.